right. We're sliding into home plate with this video. All right. Last one. Workplace diversity management and training. All right. So we've been seeing demographic changes in the workforce for the past 25, 30 years. And, so we need to adjust and adapt to the population that is in the organization, right? So we find that as of 2024, the federal government spends more than $16 million a year on diversity training. 100% of the Fortune 100 companies provide some type of diversity training to some extent. So what are the primary objectives of diversity training? Increase awareness about diversity issues, reduce biases and stereotypes that interfere with effective management, and change behaviors so that a diverse workforce can more effectively be managed. So what you notice in all of these, it has to do with sort of helping people to recognize that there are differences between people, that we don't all think the same, we don't all act the same, we don't all believe the same things, and that maybe we can open our minds to variations and not necessarily assume stereotypical assumptions, right? The biggest underlying goal of diversity training is to help ensure that we can all interact in such a way. You don't have to change your opinions or your belief systems or anything like that, but that you need to at least interact in such a way that everyone can work together to achieve the organization's goals. And so that's the main reason why diversity training is important, is that a lot of interactions that we have in the workplace can have the opportunity for misunderstanding. Little cultural differences, things like that can have an impact. I'm thinking of a number of different examples of sort of like communication errors that can occur. If you come from a culture where the polite thing to do when you're listening to someone talk is to look away from them, you may have difficulty functioning in a traditional American organization where the mores are that a person who's listening is so avidly listening that they just stare at you raptly and they're so excited. And, you're just looking, but that's the impression you get by looking at a person, is that I'm listening. Whereas the speaker may look away, right? The speaker may hold eye contact and then look away, and then hold eye contact and then look away. That's called, the typical like dynamic, how the dyad kind of interacts. If you come from a culture that looks away while listening, you have a person who's listening to a speaker who expects to be looked at. It feels like you are not listening, or you don't like me, or you don't like what I'm saying, or something like that. And so you'd have these mismatches, right? Between a person who might be completely listening, but following their cultural tendency, and a person who is now feeling slighted. These are the kinds of things that diversity management can help us with. I'm not sure that that's what the trainings all focus on. That is a problem. The trainings should focus on those things, those kinds of things where we may have opportunities for conflict or opportunities for hurt feelings or misunderstandings, because we work better when we don't have those things going on. Because they don't all focus on those key things, I think that's why we have mixed evidence for the effectiveness of diversity training. Anti-bias training does not eliminate bias. Biases that we hold are so like part of us. You really can't expect to sit in a training session and convince a person that the biases that they hold, that they might not even be aware they hold, need to be changed. I mean, that's a really impossible task. So it's not surprising that it doesn't work. Now, if we could get people just to change their behavior, it's okay, whatever you want to hold in your head, but if you could change your behavior in the workplace, now that's another thing. But it doesn't seem to work very well for that either. And maybe it's because they're not focusing on specific points of conflict that oftentimes happen between the sexes or between different racial groups or different ethnic groups or things like that, if they would focus on specific points of known conflict, there's a lot of research on these topics. And so specific points of known conflict, that would allow us to focus in on these things and maybe actually get people to at least behave differently. We can't change how people think or what they hold in their heads, but we can change the way that they display those behaviors. And I don't think they focus enough on that. Ironically, stereotype reduction training may actually reinforce stereotypes, remind people of stereotypes that then they go, you know what, that actually, you're right. I remember hearing that. The more times you hear something, the more likely it becomes truth for you. And so having it brought up in a stereotype, this might be a stereotype that you hold and you shouldn't hold. And let me tell you why. It actually just reminded you of the stereotype. Now I heard it from another source. So it makes it more accessible and now it's in the front of their minds. So stereotype reduction training, absolutely, it's not a good idea. It just sort of makes things worse. And there's a lot of research that suggests that. Again, going after what people hold in their heads is not as productive as going after behaviors that are emitted at work. Those things we can intervene with. Thoughts that are happening in a person's head, I mean, that's why it's in our head, where it's our secret. It's our place that people don't know what we're thinking, but we can see how you're acting, what you're saying, what you're doing, those kinds of things. And that's what we need to focus on, I think, and we would get better effectiveness from diversity training. All right. Well, hopefully I went through that well enough, and hopefully you feel like at least a little bit of these things have been covered. Like I always say, there's more detail in, how to go through these processes in your textbook, but I at least gave you a little bit of an overview in these lectures. So, all right, I will see you next in the next chapter.